Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave.
On behalf of every father and every mother.
Wings for freedom. On behalf of our warriors.
And paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have a great show for you this week. It's a bit of a shorter broadcast. First, I'll be providing the weekly news report for events related to Ukraine around the world. That'll be followed by Bionade to Ukraine's report. Then we'll have a Q&A with the chat, and that'll be concluded with our picture of the week from Bionade. So I will jump right into the news.
Just 1 second. You did this once with me where you missed my segment or left out my segment, and now you left out Alex's segment.
Oh my goodness, you're absolutely right. We have a report from Alex S. Thank you very much, Maurice, that will cover the updates from Mariupol, and that will be after Germany to Ukraine's report. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's not in my written notes. I forgot that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we will now do the news. A series of explosions shook Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery in Russia's Rostov Oblast on the night of June 5th, igniting a fire that remained unextinguished due to concerns of further attacks, according to reports from ETA Rostov Novosti, which is called This is Rostov News, which is a local Telegram channel, as well as the local governor, Vasily Golubev. The report suggested that the oil refinery was targeted by drones, with videos from This is Rostov News depicting a significant fire at the facility. Golubev later confirmed that the refinery indeed came under attack by drones, resulting in a fire. Emergency response teams were swiftly dispatched to the scene. There's a discrepancy there between the emergency response teams arriving, and I guess they were hesitant to actually go in because they were worried about a follow-up attack. It's worth noting that the incident follows a previous attack on the Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery, which occurred on March 12th, where drones reportedly operated by Ukraine's defense intelligence targeted the facility, resulting in a temporary shutdown. Ukraine's military cyber specialists reportedly conducted a large-scale distributed denial of service attack, or DDoS, which disrupted the operations of numerous Russian state agencies and private companies, as per a report by Ukrainska Pravda, which cited sources from Ukraine's main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense, which is GUR, or HOR. Ukrainska Pravda stated that the functioning of various state institutions and private companies in Russia was hampered based on their investigation. While the Russian media regulator Roskomnadzor officially attributed the disruptions to a, quote, trunk network failure, sources cited by the agency indicated that the true cause was a DDoS attack. As of 11 a.m. on June 5th, access to electronic services on the State Services website, along with the services of several ministries, including Defense, Finance, Internal Affairs, Justice, Industry, and Energy, as well as Information Technologies, Communications, and Emergency Situations, were all lost. The website and service of the Federal Tax Services were also blocked, and the Federal Customs Service noted complications in transferring information with foreign countries due to a massive DDoS attack on their telecoms. The United Aircraft Corporation reported a lack of network access, which halted its operations, and disruptions in the servers, the cloud storage of Russian company Gosoblako were also reported. A unified state register of civil acts remained non-functional for several days. Some banks also reported outages, such as Sberbank and Alfa Bank, which are, of course, two very large Russian banks. And there were also noted disruptions in VKontakte, which is a Russian social media network. Dmytro Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the Defense Forces of Ukraine's South, has stated there is currently no information indicating that the occupiers in Crimea have resumed operations at the ferry crossing in the temporary occupied city of Kerch, which was struck by the Ukrainian Defense Forces on the 30th of May. Additionally, Pletenchuk noted that the Russians still possess large landing ships, but currently still appear hesitant to deploy them. Explosions were heard on the night of the 30th of May, and subsequently the Russians reported damage to 2 ferries, as well as a car and a railway ferry. Or sorry, the 2 ferries. One of them was a car ferry, one of them was a ferry for railways. The Netherlands has pledged to invest 400 million euros in a Swedish fund aimed at manufacturing infantry fighting vehicles for Ukraine, which was reported by the publication De Telegraaf. This investment is part of an ongoing support package for Ukraine, which dates back to the early stages of Russia's conflict. Recently, the Netherlands signed an endorsement for Ukraine potentially using F-16 fighter jets over Russian territory for self-defense, citing provisions within the United Nations Charter on Self-Defense. The Dutch foreign minister emphasized that if Ukraine does possess the right to self-defense, there shouldn't be any limits on the use of weaponry they're given. Now the Netherlands is extending its support by contributing to the production of infantry fighting vehicles. The defense minister revealed the commitment on June 7th, stating that the manufacturing of the vehicles would occur primarily in the Netherlands. I couldn't find specifically what vehicles. Maybe someone would know which vehicles the Netherlands make. Alongside this assistance to Ukraine, the Dutch government has also introduced an action plan aimed at bolstering its own defense industry. The plan includes the establishment of a startup budget for the defense market, which will have contributions totaling 25 million euros for the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Economic Affairs. The U.S. Department of Defense has unveiled additional security assistance aimed at fulfilling Ukraine's urgent security and defense requirements. Outlined in an announcement on the Pentagon's website, the latest initiative is the 59th tranche of equipment to be provided from the DoD inventory since August 2021 under the Presidential Drawdown Authority. The estimated value, again, is $225 million, and it includes missiles for Hawk, Stingers, HIMARS, 155 howitzers, as well as shells for 155 and 105 artillery, 81 millimeter mortar, a sizable number, if I understand correctly, of M113 armored personnel carriers. These are APCs for heavy equipment transportation, coastal and riverine patrol boats, tube-launched optically tracked wire-guided missiles or TOW missiles, javelins and AT-4 armor systems, small arms, ammunition, grenades, demolition equipment, night vision, and spare parts for maintenance and other ancillary equipment. So lots of little stuff to plug some gaps. France aims to assemble a coalition of nations to dispatch military instructors to Ukraine, as stated by French President Emmanuel Macron during a joint press conference with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on June 7th. Macron emphasized the importance of enhancing Ukraine's military capabilities, noting that Ukraine's intensifying mobilization necessitates the training of thousands of new soldiers on Ukrainian territory for maximum efficiency. While emphasizing that the goal is not to escalate tensions with Russia, Macron emphasized France's commitment to assisting Ukraine in their defense efforts. He highlighted that several allies have already agreed to join the coalition led by Paris, with plans to expand the coalition further in the coming days. Reports suggest that France intends to initially deploy a limited number of personnel to assess mission logistics before sending several hundred trainers. Zelensky expressed Kyiv's support for Macron's initiative, stating that it streamlines the training process to do it in Ukraine. In addition to the military assistance, France plans to allocate 200 million euros to companies investing in the restoration of Ukraine's critical infrastructure, with a significant portion allocated to the energy sector. All of these announcements on June 7th follow a major announcement on June 6th of the, in some French press, it was reported as a sale. However, we had our own French-speaking, our own francophones in our, group look into this. As far as we understand, it was given. So again, this report that I used here says sale. Again, I think that's just some kind of a mistranslation or something. They're given Mirage 2005 fighter jets to Ukraine, and that'll happen within the year, with plans for Ukrainian pilots to undergo training in France. Macron did not specify the exact number of Mirage 2000-5. So Mirage 2000 is the name of the jet. They'll be given the 5 version, so Mirage 2000-5. Fighter jets will be transferred to Ukraine. He hasn't specified the number. He announced a training program for Ukrainian pilots with a focus on technical training for both pilots and mechanics. The announcements happened shortly after world leaders, including U.S. President Joe Biden and Zelensky, participated in commemorating the D-Day landings in France. Macron's initiatives to support Ukraine, including the recent formation of a coalition to send long-range missiles and support for Ukraine's right to strike military bases inside Russia with Western weapons, also demonstrate France's new commitment to aiding Ukraine's defense efforts. Additionally, the French technology conglomerate Thales has confirmed the procurement by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry of a second air defense system following the delivery of an initial system in 2023. While the specific amount of the purchase was not disclosed, this was confirmed by Ukrinform, citing Le Monde. Hervé Daman, Executive Vice President for Land and Air Systems at Thales, expressed pride in leveraging the company's expertise to bolster the protection of Ukrainian territory. He emphasized that the new air defense system would enhance early threat detection capabilities and help fortify Ukraine's infrastructure. Thales detailed that the newly acquired system, dubbed the Control Master 200, has the capability to detect and track both low and high altitude targets across diverse environments. It facilitates the coordination of other air defense weaponry, ranging from SHORAD or short range air defense to extended short range or ESHORAD long range air, as well as long range air defense. The air defense system is part of a Groundmaster 200 surveillance radar, as well as a radio communication system and a control view command and control center, or C2, and a portable terminal for arms allocation. The Groundmaster 200 radar is a medium-range transportable radar mounted on a truck, and it's the key component of the system. As mentioned, it boasts an ability to detect enemy aircraft at distances of 250 kilometers, as well as engage them at ranges of up to 100 kilometers. The radar system is very good at tracking aircraft flying at varying altitudes and speeds, including drones, as well as providing good early threat detection against incoming rockets and artillery fire, enhancing ground troop safety. Since the onset of the full-scale invasion, recent data from the Solar Energy Association of Ukraine indicates that over 300 megawatts of domestic and 90 megawatts of industrial solar power plants have been recorded in the country under the feed-in tariff, as stated by Vladislav Sokolovsky, the chairman of the board of the association. The feed-in tariff meaning these are actual solar panels that are plugged into Ukraine's grid. They're not accounting for, private solar panels. Sokolovsky specified that the installed capacity of residential solar power plants has surpassed 1.5 gigawatts. He highlighted that the tally excludes solar installations by households for personal consumptions, as it's a challenge to ascertain their numbers accurately. Furthermore, Ukraine's energy network encompasses 5.9 thousand megawatts of industrial solar power plants situated in occupied territories. Sokolovsky also stated that with the eruption of the full-scale invasion, the Russian Federation seized over 60 industrial solar power plants, which totaled a combined capacity of 950 megawatts. They also inflicted destruction on at least 15% of Ukraine's total solar facilities. He noted that the Russian military recently targeted the 240 megawatt Pokrovska solar power plant, which is situated in Nikopol district of Dnipropetrovsk. During the same press event, Sokolovsky projected that by the conclusion of 2024, it's conceivable to install an additional 400 to 500 megawatts of new solar generation capacity into the grid, contingent upon state support for the endeavor. The European Commission is set to propose that the EU commence accession talks with Ukraine before July, coinciding with Hungary assuming the rotating presidency of the Council of the EU. Belgium, the current presidency holder, is reportedly pressing ahead, hoping to achieve unanimity for the decision before Hungary takes over the presidency on July 1st, according to the Financial Times, citing sources familiar with the matter. Budapest close ties with the Kremlin since the initiation of the full-scale invasion have led to repeated opposition to sanctions against Moscow and obstruction of EU support for Ukraine. In May, Politico also reported that the EU and Ukrainian officials are striving to commence formal accession negotiations by June 25th, with intensive diplomacy aimed at persuading Hungary to withdraw its objections to Ukrainian membership. Ukraine obtained EU membership candidate status in June 2022, and in November 2023, the European Commission recommended launching accession talks. However, for talks to commence, the EU requires unanimous agreement that Ukraine has made strides in addressing issues such as corruption and the protection of minority languages. The Financial Times noted that Hungary is expected to raise objections, particularly regarding the issue of minority languages. Budapest has persistently contended that the Hungarian ethnic minority in southwestern Ukraine faces discrimination due to Kyiv's language laws. Ukraine refutes the allegations and has updated its national minorities law at the end of 2023 in accordance with the EU's recommendations. Additionally, while the European Commission advocates for formal talks to commence with Moldova, Georgia will not receive the green light due to the current adoption of the Foreign Agents Law, which was in defiance of the EU's warnings. The UN Human Rights Office disclosed on June 7th that Ukraine witnessed a distressing surge in civilian casualties, with the death toll reaching 174 in the month of May, marking the highest total level in nearly a year. The escalation in missile and bomb attacks on populated areas around Kharkiv have contributed significantly. The statement revealed that over half of the casualties occurred in Kharkiv city and its surrounding region, where Russian armed forces have initiated a new ground offensive on May 10th. The intensified attacks in this area are characterized by the deployment of airdrop bombs and missiles in populated zones near the front line and within Kharkiv city, which has exacerbated the toll on civilians. Russian forces launched fresh offensive operations in the northern part of Kharkiv, subjecting the neighboring settlements to heavy bombardments. The onslaught resulted in a 31% surge in civilian deaths in May, marking the highest number of casualties since June 2023. Among the tragic incidents cited in the report, there was a printing house in Kharkiv on May 23rd, which claimed 7 lives and injured 21 individuals. 2 days later, an aerial assault demolished a large home improvement shopping center, which we also reported on, resulting in the death of 19 people and injuring 54 others. 9 civilians lost their lives following multiple missile attacks on a residential area in Kharkiv. The UN report cited that the overwhelming majority of civilian casualties, 92%, and damage to educational and health facilities occurred in Ukrainian-controlled territory during May. In other words, most of the attacks Ukraine was the victims of. As of May 30th, Russian forces maintained control over several settlements on 2 separate fronts, one near Vovchansk and the other toward Liptsi. However, their advance has so far been limited to a maximum distance of 10 kilometers from the internationally recognized borders. During a media workshop on international law and armed conflicts and Russia's accountability for international crimes, Attorney General Andriy Kostin shed light on the alarming prevalence of physical and psychological torture endured by returning military prisoners, with up to 90% reported to have suffered abuses. Kostin emphasized that Russia's army's systematic torture of both military personnel and civilians who hold pro-Ukrainian views is a widespread and deeply concerning practice. He described Russia's approach as a systematic regime of torture and inhumane treatment inflicted upon individuals within the occupied territories and even inside Russian territory itself. Brenda Hollis, the head of the International Criminal Court team in Ukraine, discussed investigative strategies for addressing torture in the places of detention. She emphasized the importance of identifying trends and patterns in the perpetuation of torture rather than focusing on individual cases. Hollis stressed the significance of gathering comprehensive information to acquire the necessary evidence and testimonies to build broader understanding of the crimes. Furthermore, Hollis noted that the ICC team is scrutinizing the actions of individuals involved in perpetrating such crimes at middle and higher levels of authority, particularly those who are subordinate to specific individuals responsible for orchestrating the atrocities. The approach seeks to hold accountable not only the direct perpetrators, but also those who bear command responsibility for overseeing or condoning such acts of torture. So that concludes my news report for this week. I will now turn it over to Mr. German Aid to Ukraine for his report. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a short question. As mentioned before, we have a segment also from Alex S. Alex, new contributor to Tochnyi, had a power outage just now. That's why he had to reconnect. Alex, do you want to do your segment first, just in case the electricity goes out again? Or
Okay, yeah, I can do that. I'm currently on 5G and laptop, so we will see how it goes. So yes, I can
just if
start.
you want
My
to.
segment is a short one, so that's okay for me.
Okay, then
Okay,
go ahead.
so if you can put the slide, yes. So on May 31st, the Mayor Oleg Morgun signed an order to forbid bathing in the Sea of Azov and other water bodies. The document that you see here on screen, translated with Google Translate, acknowledges that the occupiers have difficulties in ensuring the safety of people in the water, and the ban is introduced to preserve lives and health. Go to the next page of each document. However, not really sure if it's safety issue. Other than
Just quick question. Do
Yeah.
I have the audio issues or does anybody have the...
Yeah, it's like doubling up.
Alex, can you
So
say something for a second?
okay. Can you?
You're doubling. You're like talking once, but it sounds like you're talking twice. Maybe we should
No,
do
okay,
segment
so
a little bit later, and you try to reconnect.
for that. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Then I do my segment first. Okay. Sorry about the issues.
The Erland gone curse.
Yeah, as always, everything is prepared perfectly, everything is set up perfectly, and then the stream starts and everything goes down. As always, I will now present the most important news from Germany regarding German aid to Ukraine for this week. And this week, there's actually not a lot to talk about, at least not a lot important stuff to talk about. So it will be a short segment. On Wednesday, the Budget Committee of the German Bundestag approved the purchase of additional 155mm artillery ammunition worth around 880 million euros for both the Bundeswehr and for Ukraine. The framework contract itself, from which further orders can now be called up, has also been significantly increased from hundreds of thousands of shells to millions of shells. It has also made public that it is an open framework contract with Rheinmetall, according to a Spiegel report, and that Denmark, Estonia, and the Netherlands have already participated in the German framework contract and procured artillery shells for themselves or for Ukraine. And already as the last item of this week, according to a report by Bloomberg published on Friday, which cites people familiar with the matter, Germany is considering providing Ukraine with a fourth Patriot battery. The German government has currently delivered 2 batteries to Ukraine and promised a third one, which will likely to be delivered this month. Of course, nothing is confirmed yet, and it is just a media report, but in my opinion, this is not unlikely to happen. I personally would have just thought it's going to happen later this year. But if it is going to happen soon, it's excellent news. This would also mean that out of the then 5 Ukrainian Patriot fire units, 4 originate from Germany. And I just want to say it's very likely to happen, just really didn't expect it to happen this soon, because our Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius, said, like, I believe 2 months ago or something, that during the announcement of the third pledged Patriot fire unit, that this won't be the last one Germany pledges to Ukraine. So it was already clear that we pledged another one, at least a fourth one. Just really didn't expect it to be happening before we even delivered the third one. That's actually very great news, if it's true. That's of course, very important. And that's actually all I had for perfect timing. All I had for this week. Alex, quick mic check. Are you here? Doesn't seem to be good.
First, too
maybe
much, Alex. Now, not enough.
Yeah, too much pressure. Maybe Bionade, are you here? Perfect. 2 contributors, both logged in, nobody's talking. Otherwise, we could have done the picture of the week first and then go to Alex. Okay, Bionade is reconnecting, apparently. There he is. Bionade, are you here?
Did a sound test before the stream.
Everything went fine. Yeah. Well, problem now is how long do we want to wait for the picture of the week and Alex segment? Regarding Alex segment, it's really a great one, right? So I wouldn't mind. Alex,
Mic
no,
check,
we
test.
can't hear. We can hear Bionade. Alex, no, we can't hear you. Bionade, do you want to present your picture of the week first, and then we go to Alex segment if we can fix this mic?
For sure.
Oh, okay, let's go.
All right, then let's talk about the picture of the week. I was able to visit yesterday the ILA in Berlin, which is basically a convention for aerospace and airplane engineering, and also for air defense systems and defense manufacturing and these things. And we were able to see there an IRIS-T SLM launcher and basically a whole IRIS-T system. And yeah, for me it was the picture of the week, because these systems are one of many systems in Ukraine. Defending Ukraine daily, saving lives, and it's quite impressive to see such a system live, standing there in front of you. Also, I heard these systems working in Kyiv sometimes, so I'm very happy these systems are there, and Germany is delivering them. Deal Defense is building them, so yeah, very happy to have them in Ukraine, and hopefully they continue to do this amazing work, and we will deliver more and more systems and enough rockets so Ukraine can shoot down all the Russian incoming missiles and drones and other threats from the air.
Mr. Bionade, I saw that you purchased a beverage there that was called IRIS-T, but it was like iced
Jesus
tea, right?
Christ.
yes.
What, did they have any other?
Yes, basically they had iced tea. They dispensed there in these cool cups you get at festivals or at concerts, right, with the print on it. And there was an IRIS-T print on it, and the tea was spelled like the tea you can drink.
Did they have any other fun stuff like that, or is that the main?
Only the only thing I saw. From this kind of direction. Also, we got some in German we call it Bierdeckel. It's basically where you put your beer on if you want to keep the bottle of beer. Basically, you put on, or you as a glass when you want to keep the table.
A beer cozy.
Good. A beer cozy, yes, from the German startup Donaustahl, which are also engineering the mouse and testing some things in Ukraine. Was quite nice seeing some systems which are in action in Ukraine, or maybe in the future in action in Ukraine, or getting developed with help of Ukrainians. Yes, this is a cup, the IRIS-T.
Yeah, I found it.
Very good. It's hard to see, but in the end, out of the missile, there are like bubbles coming out instead of exhaust gases. So yeah, the cool iced tea from the IRIS-T, the dehydration defender. We really needed it. It was a hot day, so yeah, was great. They not only had air defense there, but also dehydration defense.
That's actually very, in my opinion, this is like the typical German word, right? When all of the guys like talking about Germans don't have humor, and then I see jokes like this, like IRIS-T, I know exactly what I mean. I know exactly. I was looking at that image, and it was the first thing that crossed my mind. Yeah, Germans really don't have humor.
Yeah.
Well, this is sort of this is like a trade convention thing, I think, right? Like, it's just a very common. Yeah, like we see these corny things in the US too, with like at trade shows. I'm less familiar with defense trade shows, but I've been to like publishing trade shows and stuff.
Yeah.
You gotta have a swag, right? You want people to remember the brand, so you give them some cup or a flashlight or a USB stick, something like that.
Yeah, true.
Absolutely. No pens or pencils. Was this cool cool cup. So yeah, really happy. Also, I was really happy to see the Patriot systems there standing. Yeah, also quite a good system. Saved my ass multiple times in Kyiv. So yeah, happy all these systems were there, and happy they are in Ukraine working well.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much, Mr. Bionade.
Should
Any
we
other
test
thoughts?
Alex?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, let's try Alex out.
I guess I heard him very silent.
Yeah,
Is that
very
the
silently,
case?
but we heard
Yeah.
something.
Alex, can you speak a little bit louder or get your microphone closer to your mouth?
Or I can change the mic. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Oh yeah, that's better.
Fine.
Okay, do we want to try your segment once again?
Let's hope it works. So, on May 31st, the Mariupol Gauleiter Oleg Morgun signed an order to forbid bathing in the Sea of Azov and in other water bodies. The document that we see on screen now, translated with Google Translate from Russian, acknowledges that the occupiers have difficulties in ensuring the safety of people in the water, and the ban is introduced to preserve lives and health. However, we are not really sure that the safety is the issue here or if it's a health problem. You can show the next page of the document. And in fact, as we are going to see very soon, on June 5th, a dead dolphin appeared on a beach in the city. Here you see on screen. The cause of its death is not clear. It might be the propeller of a military boat, but it also might be linked to the destruction of the Sea of Azov natural ecosystem by the invaders. In fact, as you might know, water has become a significant issue in occupied Mariupol. The sewage system was damaged during 86 days of fighting in the city and was not being repaired by the occupiers. You can go to the next slide because we are going to see that is resulting in sewage rivers appearing across the whole city. From the west, in Kuprin Street number 11, which is the one that we see in this picture, to the far east of the city in Peremoy Avenue 98. And additionally, the water supply has become increasingly problematic for several reasons. Water in Mariupol was originally supplied from the Seversky Donets River, which runs east of the city. Since the war broke out, the occupiers had to use the reserve supply from the Stary Krim, which is in northwest of the city. The quantity and the quality of the water there to meet the needs of a city like Mariupol. And remember when we had Lushenko interviewed in one of our earlier streams, he was talking about this issue. You can move to the next slides. And the water from Stary Krim, so the reserve supply, is considered purely technical and cannot be drunk. The pumps approach the bottom sediments, and the water in the pipes becomes brown and muddy due to its low quality and the inefficient filters. The water is not meeting the drinking water standards. And the problem is evident in several pictures published on social medias by the inhabitants, but the most notorious one is the video published in April, where a water filter becomes unusable after a few seconds. We showed this 3 or 4 weeks ago. You can go to the next slide. And the technical difficulties due to war damages and the complete lack of repairs and maintenance of the water system are not the sole causes of this emergency. In fact, in early April, the occupiers assured that the water complies with all the microbiological standards, but the residents' experiences tell a very different stories. There are two rivers flowing through the city to the Sea of Azov, the Kalchik and the Kalmius, and both are visibly polluted by feces and waste from a small concrete plant operated by the occupiers in the area. You can go to the next slide and we can see how the water looks like in the rivers. An article that was published on May 15th described the Kalchik River, the one that we see here, as muddy and white like milk. And it mentions also a dam built by the occupiers that has worsened the river's quality. Almost a month later, on June 8th, Petro Andriushchenko, advisor to the mayor Mariupol, posted a video on his Telegram channel showing the river condition, which is almost dried up and with white and stagnant water. So the situation is become worse than what is in this picture from land. Seriousness of the water issue in Mariupol was underscored on May 23rd when the occupiers confirmed a rise of intestinal infections. They were blaming the insufficient observance of the rules for storing perishable products and personal hygiene measures just by inhabitants. But in reality, the poor water quality and the lack of functioning water supply and the sewage systems play a significant role in this epidemic, and are compounded by constant problems with energy supply, which are leaving the citizens without electricity around the clock. This is everything that I had for tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alex. Just as an explanation, like I said, he had a power blackout. I would offer everyone that we will record the segment later with clean audio when his power is back on, and we upload it to our YouTube channel. You can repeat and listen to it again. Yeah, thanks, Alex. Again, it was a little bit difficult to follow. Of course, not your fault because of the power issue. But yeah, so, and that's basically, after about 40 minutes, all we had for this week. Do we have any, Joseph, do we have any questions in the chat to answer, or?
Well, I think we can maybe have just a little brief discussion about what's going on in the European Parliament right now. Obviously, I'm a total outsider to this, but you know, we have a lot of Europeans at the old water cooler at Tochnyi, and this is just kind of what I've been picking up, right? I mean, I was reading kind of some of the reports about the EU elections, in, you know, as relayed to me by U.S. media sources, and the general vibe was that we're going to have kind of an increase in the prevalence or the dominance of parties that are less sympathetic to Ukraine in the EU elections, right? These parties go by a lot of different labels in the European political scheme of things, right? It's there's a lot of different countries here, so the politics is very complex, but you know, they go by a lot of different labels, right? Like nationalist parties, far-right parties, isolationist parties, Eurosceptic parties, maybe anti-immigration parties, things like this. Russian
Far
alliance
left.
parties, yeah, far left parties, also true.
Far left anti-American parties, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
just a large kind of, you know, we wouldn't call them one single thing, but all of them share in common that they maybe aren't as sympathetic to the idea of helping Ukraine with weapons immediately and financial support. So it appears, based on our preliminary look at some of the you know, outgoing polls in various countries, that it's looking to be borne out that it's been a rough election for the European Parliament, as was predicted. In other words, it didn't go against the prediction that we were going to see gains for these, you know, less enthusiastic Ukraine parties. No worries. In the elections, that appears to be bearing out in the numbers. Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's not going to be great news for Ukraine in terms of EU stuff for a little while. As I mentioned, the presidency of the European Union is going to move to Hungary in July, which is, you know, going to cause some issues. There's a reason they're trying to expedite this accession talk. And then these new gains that these nationalist parties have made, or these, you know, anti-Ukraine parties, I don't know quite how to put the, you know, it's difficult to put a label on them, but anyway, these new parties in the European Parliament will probably make it more difficult in general to pass aid through EU mechanisms. I think maybe the thing we should understand or try to. We shouldn't be too bummed out in the sense that the EU isn't the only mechanism through which to help Ukraine, right? Like, German aid to Ukraine every week has his report about what is being given mainly bilaterally by Germany, right? He doesn't really go too deep into the commitments that Germany also does to the EU, right? So, so like those bilateral mechanisms are still possible; they still exist. And we see France stepping up, and so the EU isn't the only mechanism by which Ukraine can get help, but it's certainly not great news to see the EU elections not go great for Ukraine, and also the presidency will be going to Hungary for a while until it rotates again. So I don't know, any thoughts from all these Europeans on our panel?
Well, Bionade, if you want to think about your answer to the question first, I will go first. Of course, I'm not sure if Bionade also has just information about Germany, but I personally, of course, have just the forecasts, let's say, about Germany, about the German parties. And there it really doesn't look good. I've just had a look at the first forecast, because then we started the stream, so I don't have the latest forecasts. But according to the first one, of course, the biggest opposition party. Hold on, let me try to get this up.
Short and quick answer from me. It seems like the pro-Putin parties have won around maybe 10 to 11%. That's not good, but it's not enough yet to make a difference. But it's still very annoying to see, especially the pro-Putin AfD and the pro-Putin Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht with together around maybe 20%. It's not a good thing that it happened. It's not catastrophic yet, but it's very, very not good. And back to you.
So just to set it up, of course, the strongest, according to the first election forecast, of course, the strongest party is the big opposition party, CSU, together with the CSU. For those who don't know, that's the old Merkel party, so the party where Merkel was the chancellor with. Then we have, of course, the current government, the Greens, die Grüne, and the SPD, the Chancellery Party with Olaf Scholz, and of course the FDP. We especially see in the Greens, and I personally would say that the Greens within the German government are the strongest Ukraine supporters. One might argue, for example, one of my followers, which is totally fine. Yeah, we're living in a democracy. He argued that the CDU-CSU is at least as Ukraine supporting as the Greens. I personally wouldn't go that far, because to me it's always that I think when a party is part of the government, it's actually very pro-Ukraine or very vocal about aid to Ukraine. I actually believe them when they say this. When a party is an opposition party and needs to be elected during the next election, I always have a little bit in my mind that, could be just for the election. What they do when they actually be in government, it's something completely different. And we see a huge decrease compared to the last election in 2019, which is not very good. The SPD, although it's not a big decrease, is on a historic low, which is also I saw one video of a German reporter for Politico, and this was, I believe it was in the German Bundestag, and everyone was silent. All the politicians there, nobody wanted to talk. Everyone was in shock because it's an all-time low, and as the leading party within Germany. Then we have, of course, the AfD, the Alternative für Deutschland, so the Alternative for Germany, which is very pro-Russian with all their recent scandals of bribery, pro-Russian involvement, and all this kind of stuff. Actually, the second strongest party in Germany. And let me remind you again, this is the first forecast, right? That's not the final results. That's the first forecast, but still very, very shocking to me. I don't have any other words. And the BSW, Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, which is also very pro-Russian. Yeah, in the meantime, stronger than the FDP, for example, which is also part of the German government. And yeah, that's really nothing more going on to say for Germany. At least for my part, it's very shocking to see. I don't know, Bionade, if you have any other answer to that apart from shocking, but yeah.
Yeah, very, very annoying to see these fascists like the AfD rise up and this, pro-Putin, pro-autocracy, populists from the BSV. It's very, very, very annoying. Yeah.
And I just see in the private chat, LXS wrote that Le Pen's party in France got 31.5%. That's, yeah. Maybe we have some French viewers who actually can talk about that, if that was expected or not. But that's, at least to me as an outsider from Germany who is involved in French politics that far, really looks also not very good, to be honest.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, otherwise, no, you have audio issues.
Okay, but then I will continue in chat.
Yeah.
Never mind.
I'm very sorry, Alex. You have big audio issues. Joseph, from an outsider perspective, from an American, do you had expected this, or was there any media coverage in the US about the European elections and what to think about them?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, there was just a bit of a discussion before the election began that it looked like it was going to be a rough time for Ukraine. It sounds like, I think Bionade put into perspective a bit that it's maybe not as bad as the media here was forecasting, but yeah, I think that was the broad view here, was that we were being told that the elections were going to, I would say the main headline was like far right parties will gain in European Union elections. That's pretty much like was the general reporting here before the election started. So this just seems to basically sort of more or less confirm what we were being told, eh?
I am. Okay, good.
Yeah,
as far
and
just
someone in chat mentioned also in France, we saw Thierry mentioned that the far right party of Le Pen and the far left party, which is Zemmour, the two far right parties together got 38%. So in other words, RN, which is Le Pen's party, and Reconquête, which is another party, combined got 38%, and then the far left got 9% total. So in France also, bit of a rough time for Ukraine coming up in the European Union. But, as we mentioned, we still have the actual governments of the countries that can, happily join other coalitions that are funding various things for Ukraine, like the drone coalition and the artillery coalition, and the capability coalitions, as they're called, right? And also, just do straight up bilateral aid, like what Germany's doing, or Denmark, or the Netherlands do every time. So, there's still lots of options, but I would guess that this means that it's going to be more difficult for EU accession talks for Ukraine in the future. So, I mean, I'm not super optimistic that this can all get done in a month, if I'm being honest, but hopefully they can make a lot of progress within a month, and then we can, make a little bit of progress during this more difficult time. And so EU accession talks are probably going to be more difficult, and it's probably going to be, we're not going to see super duper enthusiastic support from the EU Parliament or at least maybe not as enthusiastic as we saw in the past. But I don't think it's the end of like EU support for Ukraine, or it's not a complete about face or anything like that. It's not a change in government in Europe or something. It's just some of the momentum for Ukraine support is going to be now hampered by these like vocal, what spoiler parties. I don't know what to call them. They go in the EU and they talk about how dumb the EU is, like Hungary, right? Like they're following, I'd say, a lot of them the Orbanist model. But as Bionade said, there's also far left parties, so it's not really like a right left issue as much as at least for us here, like a supporting Ukraine issue. But yeah, it's overall, I think it's obviously not great news, but like not the end of the world. I don't want to oversell how, like, I don't want to suggest that it's absolutely terrible or irreconcilably bad news either.
No, absolutely. I just want to point out, like you mentioned, that we should focus on bilateral aid. I just want to remind people that there was a lot of media reports on it. Of course, no direct confirmation from the German side, but from the statements I watched, and I watched a lot of statements from the German government to do my work. I would say this is accurate information, and there were a lot of media reports like last year that Germany was trying to push countries to contribute more bilateral aid instead of financing via the EU, just because when you finance bilaterally, most of the time nobody can pressure you to do otherwise, right? There's like I know there were a lot of media reports, and that's why I said most of the time, for example, the US or other countries pressuring Sweden not to send Gripen to Ukraine. Now Ukraine gets French fighter jets. But most of the time, you can't be pressured to don't do something, and that's very, very strong. While when we're seeing EU-financed mechanisms via the EPF, for example, although that's very, very great, and I do appreciate that, we see that, for example, Hungary can easily block them. I mean, how many months do we had to wait for these? What was it, like 60 billion or something, or 50 billion? I don't quite remember anymore how much it was, but it was a long time. Hungary blocked this, and yeah, that's why bilateral aid, in my opinion, is always the best option to actually get things done, because you can't block it. It's faster, and you only have to talk to Ukraine basically, and not talk to 30 other countries to actually approve this. I don't know, Bionade, if you have a different opinion on this, or Joseph.
No, I'm too far removed from the politics of the European Union. They're quite Byzantine and incomprehensible to us. But I think this one is simple enough that we can sort of take it apart, or get at least a general takeaway. But the general vibe in the chat, I think, is accurate. That like it probably doesn't change much in the grand scheme of things for Ukraine.
Yeah. In the end, we had the same with the vote here with the AfD in Saxony-Anhalt, right, Maurice, where basically they came into the parliament with like 20% or something, and in the end they did nothing in the local parliament because they don't know how things work. They don't want it to make things. They're just there to do their populism, and there's nothing from efficacy coming out of there, and there's no initiative. So yeah, it's a waste of taxpayers' money and a waste of time of everyone to have these parties in the European Parliament. But that's how democracy works, it seems. So
yeah. I mean, I do agree. I always just think about like, why are people voting these parties, right? And I saw an interesting graph and statistic of the AfD voters, the far right party, the pro-Russian far right party. Let me get this up. And their AfD voters were asked how they view their own party, right? And 5%, of course, 5% of the whole parties or the whole voters which are interviewed said that they think that the AfD is a far right party. Yeah, and 82% said it's totally irrelevant for them if it is a far right party, as long as they talk about the right help me out with the English word Bionade Themen topics, right? And that's very, for me, I mean, you have to imagine that it's for you it's totally irrelevant for whom you vote. They just have to talk about the right subjects or the right topics, and it doesn't matter to them if they vote actually for a far right party who wants to get out of the EU and like is pro-Russian in a genocidal war. And I don't know. I always can't imagine that. And for even that's even more disturbing when you see like how many far right voters they have in Eastern Germany, and me and Bionade as in Eastern Germany or Eastern German voters. I mean, I can't really understand it. The only explanation I see for this is that that Russia still has a lot of influence in the older peoples. But that's
I also think especially the younger generation was very much influenced by new channels of media like TikTok, where like especially the AfD and other populist parties were like very active, and the other parties which lost were not so active. It's still quite annoying, especially because it's clearly a right-wing party, and some people still see it as a protest party, right?
Yeah, but especially in the younger voters, like how can you grow up in our country or in the EU in general? Yeah, but let's just talk about Germany. How can you grow up in Germany, go to our through our school system, learn all that stuff about the EU and how the world order works and stuff like this, and then you go out and are allowed to actually vote and say, it's good to vote for the AfD, and that's what I don't get. Like with the elderly people, I say okay, maybe they had some influence on the because they lived under Russian control, but especially with the younger generation, I really can't understand how you can grow up in Germany or in a country like Germany and then vote for a far right party. But yeah, it's that we're drifting away here, so probably you should end.
I think though, like Bionade is onto something about like media consumption habits, right? Like I remember reading about German media consumption habits that like you guys trust the TV. You watch a lot of Germans watch TV. Not only do Germans get their news more from TV than like most other, like compared to the US, for example, but also they like trust it, right? Like if you ask, like, do you trust like TV news? They're like, yeah. And I think Bionade is probably right that like younger people who are super young, like 18, 20, something like that, their media consumption habits are probably break that trend a bit. And so you're going to see a bit of a surge there. So I think it's something like Germany probably had a bit of a like strength there in terms of like the TV institutions in Germany for news are quite strong. There's you guys have quite credible sources for information, but like moving forward, probably like having a more robust presence online will be important for like the German information sphere moving forward, especially with countries like Russia and China actively working to kind of disrupt it, right? But there was one other topic, obviously, this week that we should probably talk a little bit about. There's not many of us here, but just the Mirage aircraft.
Oh,
I would
Jesus.
say, like, yeah, I know. I would say at Tochnyi, we are of the angry uncle faction that said, spend money on F-16s. Don't send all these bespoke, handcrafted French fighter jets. That said, I think this is sort of a reasonable reaction, probably from Ukraine to the current situation that they face. This, I want to stress, is like my hot take, but I think it's fairly backed up by like what we've seen, which is currently, as far as I understand, U.S. pilot training is at its limit. And Ukraine has requested like more pilot training and I think other types of training. And the US has basically said, like, other countries need to be trained. In addition to that, like, the US Air Force has basically said, like, no airframes for Ukraine. Like, we need all the airframes we have. You got to find F-16 somewhere else. So I think, like, the combined fact of those two things, the fact that the US, the country that could really supply a meaningful number of F-16s to Ukraine, is telling them no airframes, no priority training. They're looking at that and going, this is really bad. We need to start looking at alternatives here. And as a result, I think that probably the French have been asking to unload some Mirages for a while. Or I shouldn't say unload, but they've been probably offering Mirage for a while. But I think that Ukraine increasingly is looking at the US position here and saying we need an alternative, and they probably agreed to Mirage. We'll probably, because we'll see more numbers of Gripens, we'll probably also see the Swedish fighter jet, the Gripen, introduced to Ukraine. Thierry, who's in our chat, mentioned that he predicts that probably maybe 6 airframes of Mirage would be like a number that would be conceivable. Maybe we'll maybe say 6 and maybe 10, like, just as a guess, just based on the French configuration, like what they would need right now. So yeah, I don't know, like, that would be my hot take here. Like, it's not something it wouldn't be my first choice. My first choice would be for Ukraine to focus on F-16. For countries that wanted to give Ukraine airframes, to not hand them these little bespoke aircraft and instead focus on funding the F-16 program for Ukraine and the training. However, it appears, I'm no expert, but it appears that there aren't a lot of options for that route. And as a result, we're getting the suboptimal option, which is what we're seeing now with the Mirages and with the Gripens. And quite frankly, if it's certainly better than just sitting around waiting for the US to change their mind about their F-16 policy. So I commend France for what they're doing. I think it's good to see any kind of airframe go to Ukraine. I think it breaks taboos to see strategic weapons go to Ukraine. We might see France say, sure, you can use Mirages to attack Russian targets in Ukraine, attack Russian targets in Russia. Like, that might break some taboos, right? So it's probably a good thing in general. I should say probably. It is a good thing that countries are giving Ukraine weapon systems, even if I want to have an angry tantrum about it not being the optimal choice, right? So yeah, I don't know. Germany to Ukraine, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to highlight 2 things before I really start, because first is I'm not against French aid, or I'm against France at all. I just want to make that clear in advance, because during my argument or my presentation, let's call it that, I probably sound a lot of skeptic or a lot of criticism from my side. I just want to point out that, with all the PR talk from Macron, and I think that's very, very good, because he has something which Scholz, for example, doesn't have, and that's charisma, and that he actually talks about stuff fearless, right? When I listen to Scholz, in my opinion, this is my personal opinion, when I listen to him, it always sounds like he tries to justify, like, this not escalatory, and he always talks a little bit with fear. And when people compare Macron with Scholz, they say that Macron says all these very nice things, and in my opinion, they always forget after that or during that that France is giving Ukraine far, far less than many other European countries. Above all, of course, Germany. I mean, I was asked a couple of days ago or 1 day ago or something like this in a Discord group, like, with the now pledged Mirage fighter jets, has France then given Ukraine the same amount of military aid in terms of what it is worth, right, as Germany? And I was like, how even close? Like, in the same time, until the end of 2023, Germany has given Ukraine 4 billion euros more than France. And when you now compare how much shit Germany is getting from other people on social media, especially, of course, and what France is giving, despite the fact that they're providing much less military aid to Ukraine, actual military aid, this is like what drives me crazy. And that's why I always, when I hear stuff like this, like Mirage fighter jets, I think it's very good that we find solutions for problems, like when, for example, with the F-16s. The problem I have now, and I don't know if the number is true because I'm not focusing on French aid, of course. So it might be wrong what I'm saying or what the reader or watcher of us said. How many airframes did you say? 6, 7?
Yeah, so
Joseph?
Thierry in chat mentioned, I'm trying to find the exact quote here, but it was, I want to say they said like France has like 26, and that would, they can't get rid of more than, they want to have at least 20, so that would, they would estimate like maybe 6. But yeah, I don't know, Thierry, if you wanted to elaborate in chat, thanks.
Yeah. So my question now would be with 6. I mean, let's just say this is right? I mean, I don't have intel. As far as I understood, or as far as I remember, the actual amount is not disclosed yet. So we just say 6. The question I have now, and this would be a great discussion for John, for example, is with 6 airframes and the Ukrainians actually already have the capability to launch Scalp EG, is it really worth to supply, maintain, train, and have the logistical supply chain behind it for 6 airframes? Is this really worth the work?
Yeah,
That's
it's a good question.
Yeah, that's the question I have now, and I personally can't answer it. Of course, when it's more, when it's like 20, 30, or 40 airframes, of course, this is, ignore what I've said right now. That would be really great. But sending, let's just say it's true, sending 6 airframes to Ukraine with all the background work and what's necessary then, all the personnel and stuff like this for a platform, which they basically don't need in terms of launching Scalp EG. I don't know if that's worth. And that's for me, again, a PR statement. If that's true, of course. Yeah, like I said, when it's not true, when it's more than that, when it's 20, 30, 40, ignore what I've said. And that's just my my personal interpretation. And yeah, so all I had to say about that. I mean, apart from that, there was a lot of stuff France announced. I believe there was a large million sum in terms of reconstruction, which is always very appreciated, and which I really say that's very, very good. There was you talked about it in the in your news segment, the air defense system. As far as I understood, it only consists of not only of a radar and or let's say of all components without actual launchers, which is still very, very great. I mean, in terms of threat detection, stuff like this, but it's not an air defense system compared to NASAMS or IRIS-T or Patriot or something similar. So people always also should keep that in mind. And was there any other French announcement?
About the training. So this is kind of a fun story, right? Like, so Macron at some point just said, I think we might train troops in Ukraine. And actually, here's what happened. Here was the order that it happened. Sierski released a report that said the French are going to come train troops here. Isn't that great, everybody? They already came and took like a tour to like, check things out. And then the French at first were like, yeah, we might. Who knows? We're crazy like that. We're France now. And then after like a couple of days, if I remember, they took that back, right? Like there was a denial at some point.
Yeah, the Ukrainians,
like, yeah, they took back the initial statement. And then again today, France said there probably are going to train troops there, and we probably are. Macron said we're going to send people to investigate like how it's all going to work, and then we're going to send proper teams to train about 4,000 people. So it's still kind of it's still a bit vague to me exactly what's going on, but it sounds an awful lot like France is going to be training troops in Ukraine, right?
Yeah, and it's I tried to find the press statement of the Defense Ministry of Ukraine. They put it out on Twitter the other day. I still try to find it. it's just very interesting for me because in the early announcements or during the early announcement, it sounded like France is going to send like a couple of thousand trainers to Ukraine to train a huge number of Ukrainian personnel all the time, right? And now it's like, yeah, we are sending a couple of dozens to see what's going on, and then we will decide later. And the French brigade, as far as I understood, or if I recall correctly, they also announced to do that in Ukraine. Now they want to do it in France, and this is, I really don't want to blame France all the time, but for me, this is like the typical PR stuff. We have a very, very good announcement in the end, and what actually in the beginning, and what actually comes out at the end is something completely different. And here I have the press segment. Clarification regarding numerous requests from mass media regarding the reception of instructors from partner countries. So the coalition led by France, which I believe Lithuania and like 3 or 4 other countries also said they want to send instructors to Ukraine. Starting from February 2024, Ukraine expressed interest in the prospect of receiving foreign instructors in Ukraine. And I believe France started this, right, Joseph? And sorry, go ahead.
I just said, yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect. As of now, we are still in discussions with France and other countries on this issue. The Ministry of Defense, together with General Staff, started internal work on the relevant documents on this issue in order not to waste time on coordinating bureaucratic issues when the appropriate decision will be made. Okay. So I mean, it's good. I'm to be honest, I'm not lying here. I'm against training in Ukraine, and I just want to point out that our Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius, actually talked about this because, of course, he and Scholz and everybody else was also asked about it, right? The big neighboring country to France. What are we doing? Do we want to do the same? And after being asked like 100,000 times, our Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius, once said regarding these questions, you actually have to imagine or you have to actually differentiate between what is being done in Ukraine, right? When it's just basic training, I think that's okay. And I personally would also say that's totally fine. Like when a country like France wants to put their own soldiers on a risk for doing basic training in Ukraine, that's their own decision. That's totally fine. But it's something different when you actually want to train a mechanized brigade or do some specialized training in Ukraine, because you would then have to provide the security for this military site accordingly, right? I mean, you're putting the whole equipment on risk. I mean, just imagine Germany training Ukrainian personnel on the maintenance of, let's say, Marder infantry fighter vehicles, right? And then you have like the military site and 10 Marder or 15 Marder lined up, and all the personnel working on it, German personnel and German soldiers and Ukrainian soldiers. Imagine this site. Oh, we're getting fewer and fewer guys here. Imagine this military site getting a military strike, right? And you would lose your own soldiers, you would lose the Ukrainian soldiers, you would lose most of the Marders, which are quite rare, and this goes for most of the military aid when we are not talking about the US stuff, because the US can always draw a lot of military aid from their stocks. So this is where I see we need to also protect the military sites there. And then it comes to air defense systems. And and this is an ironic question, Joseph, do we see any European country except from Germany actually supplying new air defense systems to Ukraine on a regular basis, and especially the big air defense systems which are capable of intercepting every target?
No, I guess sort of NASAMS, but they take a long time to make, right? Like they're in the pipeline. And Raytheon has said they could make more Patriot, but they need money. They're not being paid by the governments to do it, so they're not.
Yeah. So then we're at the issue where we take the air defense from. Because I mean, of course, Germany could provide the air defense. I mean, we're sending now a third Patriot battery. Maybe a fourth one will be announced in the coming weeks. Who knows? But when there's France, for example, leading the capability coalition regarding trainers in Ukraine, they have actually to also supply air defense to Ukraine, but they don't either want to or they don't do it at the moment because of the Olympic Games. So there's also the question, who's protecting the military training site, right? This means that Ukraine would have to get their own air defense systems from somewhere which they are already needed, like the front line, to protect major cities, critical infrastructure, who knows, to protect the military site, which would mean that a gap would be created somewhere on the front line, or some major city would have one air defense system less, just because they want to train a couple of thousands troops more in Ukraine. And that's where I see the big issue. And that's my personal opinion. And of course, nothing is set in stone yet. So might be something completely different in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But right now, it doesn't seem right for me to do training in Ukraine, because nobody can actually secure the military training site when they are training, especially on specialized training, like do maintenance training on military vehicles and stuff like this. At least that's my personal opinion. I would love to know what the chats think about, and also, of course, what you think about, Joseph.
Well, so broadly,
If you can hear me now.
Oh.
Perhaps.
Yes, we can hear you.
Calling general elections in France, so everything is going to change in a month time.
Yeah. Macron, as far as I understand, is not super popular, so I think the elections will be quite chaotic and up in the air. And I think someone in chat mentioned probably not good news for Ukraine that this is happening.
It's going to be by the end of June, and the second round will be on the 7th of July.
Wait, so does this mean that they will elect a new government, like in France, or
yes?
Because is there any specific reason? Like I said, I'm not following France politics.
Because apparently the European election in France was so catastrophic for him, and so he's calling for new elections. So the parliament will be dissolved in the next few days, and then there will be elections by the end of June.
Okay, parliament elections, not
presidential.
So France doesn't get a new president.
No.
Right.
Okay, good. That was the information. Okay. Yeah, but thanks for bringing that to my attention. Joseph, Bionade, back again to the military training.
Oh, right. So, my general opinion, first off, I think Erlen feels pretty strongly that we need training to take place in Ukraine. I think just for sheer efficiency reasons, we need to rotate a volume of soldiers through that necessitates doing it in country. So I respect that a lot, but I'm kind of with you in my personal opinion, which is more like, it seems to me the easiest solution here, like you mentioned, all the there's pros and cons to both, right? The pro of training them in Ukraine, it's very efficient. You're going to get them the on-site training that probably is going to be a little bit more relevant. In other words, I think there is a danger of sending them to NATO bases and teaching them in NATO methods, and just sending them back when it's not really the same environment, right? So I think there's a lot of benefits to training in the country, but I think there's a lot of drawbacks too. And you mentioned all of them, right? There's a huge vulnerability to Russian strikes. That's probably the main one, right? And to me, I really kind of don't see a meaningful difference between having them do it here or having them do it in Poland, right? Put them on a train, send them to Poland versus put them on a train, send them to Lviv. What's really the difference there? So that would be probably what I would want to see. But I think that probably Erlen, I would maybe just defer to people like Erlen who are saying, listen, it's important we set this up in Ukraine for different reasons. And the other thing I should just mention, just out of fairness, I guess, or whatever, is that I've heard official statements from both the Ukrainian government and from Western governments that are to the effect of, we can't possibly train enough Ukrainian soldiers in facilities in the West. In order to train a sufficient number of Ukrainians, in order for the West to do that, we would have to do it in Ukraine. So, I'll just take that at their word and assume that that's true. So it seems as if, even though I'm kind of with you that like just setting them up on the border of Poland would make more sense logistically and like vulnerability wise. The official government statements, and I think some pretty like smart people think that it's important that they do it maybe both ways. So I think what you said is roughly true. The more basic training, we're still getting reports of Ukrainians getting to the front line with very minimal training. I mean, this has been happening for a long time, and getting them more up-to-date training from Western armies, just having more instructors available, right? Like every instructor is a soldier Ukraine has to pull from the front line, right? So having Western instructors there to help with the basic stuff is really useful and important. But when it comes to more specialized things, it makes obvious sense to send them over, out of country to like study that and keep all of those valuable assets like martyrs and radars and things like that safe, right?
As far as I understood it, the idea of having like foreign instructors in country is that you can make the specialized training right after after the basic training, and have this in country without planning like a big trip and so on and so on and so on. And the logistics are like possibly way more easy if you set up only. I mean, sure, the training, setting it up and so on, it takes some time. But if you set it up one time, you can like get a mass of people through, and you don't have the issue of transporting them, issue of housing them, and so on and so on and so on, because you can use all the facilities in Ukraine for this, right? So after 2 years, after more than 2 years, almost 2.5 years, for me it makes sense to set up training facilities there, and have specialized training, maybe even basic training, but like more specialized training there. Yeah.
But where's in my opinion, like where is the big difference? I mean, right now we just have to get the personnel from Ukraine to Germany or Poland, right? This takes 1 hour to 2 hours to just fly
No.
or take the train.
No.
On the
But
other
it
side, when we do all this
takes-
training in, sorry,
No, it's not that easy. It's literally not that easy. Like the devil's in the detail. That's the thing.
okay, but the
Like
Ukrainian
we can be in
soldiers,
Germany.
they get
like-
everything in Germany. They get
Yeah, but-
everything in Germany. They
No,
get the
but like
clothing,
Maurice, we
they get the
cannot.
guns,
We
they
cannot.
get.
We cannot. We cannot even start training new soldiers in Germany, because you heard the news. It will take up to 15 years to bring back the Grundwehrdienst, the basic training in Germany.
Yeah, but
the
that's
conscription
something
service.
completely different.
No, it's about capabilities. We cannot house enough people. We cannot train enough people. We don't have facilities. We don't have enough. Nothing. So it's really, in my opinion, totally a difference, and especially in the detail and logistics. It really makes sense to have this in Ukraine after this long time. Yeah. Because if
but
you have it set up in Ukraine, it's really easier, because the smaller portion of people you send is the people are the trainers. And so you have logistically, it makes way more sense that it's in country and you don't have to
not at
ship
all.
thousands of people. Yeah. Then
Now
we
you have
disagree
to
here.
now you have to
Yep.
move the German instructors and the all the equipment, all the weapons, the clothing, everything you
Look,
need for
I'm
the
not a
training
military
to
expert,
Ukraine.
so I'm just have my opinion here, and then we have to disagree.
Yeah, of course, that's also just my opinion, but I don't see like how this is better when you just need to move the soldiers from Ukraine to Germany, or on the other hand, move the instructors to Ukraine, including all the equipment and all the stuff they need on site. And that's
Because you only
such a
send it once there.
logistical.
You only send it once there, and it stays in Ukraine, and then you can train hundreds
No, all
thousands
the
of soldiers there.
equipment needs to get resupplied all the time.
Yeah.
Like when you
Once.
work on Leopard 1 tanks, for example, you work on them once, then they get them to deploy on the front line, then you have to get the new Leopard tanks to train on them. And that also goes for martyrs and all the equipment. It doesn't stay there on the military training side. Then you have like trained personnel, but no equipment for the trained personnel.
Yeah. And again, like I'll say, like I'm kind of with German aid to Ukraine, like on my personal opinion, but I'll stress that like the official stance of the Ukrainian government and all the foreign governments that I've heard make comments about this are saying what Bionade said, that like logistically it's not even an option for them, that it has to be done in Ukraine. So I guess we'll leave it there. But like, I think you both have very valid opinions in the matter. Like, I see the logic of what you're saying, Germany to Ukraine, but I also see the logic of like what Bionade is saying, or in terms of what the governments are saying. So I guess we'll see how it plays out, right? I think like regardless, I think as Germany to Ukraine pointed out, we need to see like a real scale here that we haven't really talked about yet. We talked about in the UK, we had that program where maybe I think 24,000 total. I really shouldn't be mentioning numbers because I don't know them off the top of my head, but we're talking a few thousand at a time. Ukraine is going to be mobilizing tens of thousands of soldiers, right? So it's a major undertaking logistically, what's coming up for Ukraine, like this new mobilization. And it's going to be difficult logistically to just get them all like housed and fed and get uniforms on them and then get them to training facilities to train them, like regardless of like how the West helps or doesn't help, right? So it's a big endeavor that Ukraine's doing, and we all hope obviously that Western partners like assist Ukraine as much as possible in doing this, because I think Ukraine was very hesitant to mobilize their population for a long time because they were so concerned with the cost of doing so, not only to the economy, like pulling all those working people out of the economy, but also like they're not quite sure how physically to train hundreds of thousands, or I shouldn't say hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of new soldiers, just like from the ground up. So I think we all hope that like for the best outcome in terms of training for Ukraine. And we'll see. I think in the coming months, or maybe month or two, we'll start seeing some of this stuff that we're talking about, on the lips of presidents of countries. We'll start seeing like on the ground in Ukraine. Does anyone else have any kind of final thoughts on these kind of things like mirages and training and all the stuff France has been talking about this week after being all getting the D-Day feels? I think they had some stuff ready.
No, just what I always think about is like of course I don't emphasize this, or I don't want this, but I can't wait to see the reaction when the first French soldiers are getting killed in Ukraine due to a strike or something, because that's something I would say the French government, and this goes for everyone, this would also go for the Germans and everybody else, like what is going or will the public opinion about this change when you actually see that your own soldiers are now dying in Ukraine? Because it's going to happen at some point, the same way as it's going to happen that Ukraine loses Patriot parts or F-16s on the front line. It's just a matter of time. It's a war, right? And that's actually what I'm fearing most about when these countries are sending, apart from losing the equipment, of course, but when they are sending soldiers to train Ukrainian personnel on site, when they're losing these soldiers, how is the public opinion going to shift? That's my major concern.
Yeah, it's a fair concern, and we couldn't possibly predict, right? The fickleness, as we've learned today, politics not only in Europe but in the world can be very fickle and turn on a dime. So, of course, we wish the French and the UK and all the people involved in the current elections in Europe the best of wishes and the best of luck, of course, to support Ukraine in the coming elections. We had our own little like issues, or like our own experience with that in the US, and certainly it's not over in the US, but we come to these inflection points of elections and things that are very critical. So we wish everyone in Europe luck for those things, and we'll go ahead and I think call the broadcast here. Maurice, any other things we want to cover before we wrap up?
Not really, no. There was plenty of discussion now, as always, and you knew that when you talked about France and training in Ukraine, these are the two topics where I would say, oh Jesus, I avoid any discussion, and now you put me on the spot here on stream.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know. I tend to avoid that stuff too. I tend to, especially in the news report, I hope people notice, like I don't ever put in my news report, there's literally every week, there's probably double these reports versus actual stuff that happened. But it's like, the Czechs are talking about doing this, or like Western leaders talk about using frozen Russian assets. It's like, who cares if they're what they're talking about, right? So I tend to stick with like concrete aid or like things that actually happen, agreements that are signed, things like that. But I don't know. It seems like France does have a meaningful strategic posture here. Like, I think you said it correctly that like the scale we're looking at here is still not what we would need to see for like something really meaningful, but we're definitely seeing them back up their words with actions. And, you know, as a result, I think it's worth just talking about a little bit. So hopefully it was like a lively discussion. And, you know, again, I think we were pretty clear that like these are just like mainly our opinions, and hopefully people didn't take too much to heart, like anything just some people on the internet talking said exactly. Outside of our capacity of like me reading official news reports from media agencies and you covering like, you know, all that stuff, I think we do our job pretty well. But when it comes to like these open-ended Q&A segments, so I guess we'll wrap up here. I guess maybe one other question I saw in chat. Someone asked like what the situation with the power grid in Ukraine is. I don't have any firsthand experience to tell you aside from, of course, our friend Vasil. Very frequently when we're talking to Vasil, his power goes out and he has to get on like, switch things around because there's no power. Blackouts are relatively common. They're usually scheduled in Ukraine. So in other words, they're like rationing power by having rolling blackouts. It happens occasionally. It's like news when there's not a blackout. I'll put it that way. When again, a scheduled blackout. I think when we hear blackout in the West, it's like, means it was a sudden, unexpected thing. So yeah, these are like scheduled blackouts that happen at predetermined times to sort of save pressure on the power grid. And as far as I understand, there was a report from the energy company of Ukraine, Ukrenergo, that about half of their power capacity has been affected by Russian strikes and attacks. So that's about the size of it. We're seeing a lot of like damage to the power grid, and it's having a major impact on the Ukrainian economy and people's everyday lives. At the same time, we are seeing a lot of like, people like Vasil, right? Like they have power banks, they have generators. They've been dealing with this for quite some time now with Russia going after the power grid. And they have a lot of adaptations in place that they didn't have at the beginning of all this, right? That said, I have heard some talk from Ukrainians that like they think this coming winter is going to be really rough, like probably rougher than last winter. And it's going to be difficult. So they're, I'd say Ukrainians are trying to make preparations as best they can for what they see as a tough upcoming winter. Someone also asked, like, are they buying power from neighboring countries? Yes, they are. They successfully hooked up the power grid meaningfully to Europe, like a couple of years ago, like in 2022. And initially they were actually exporting power to Europe because the economy slowed down so much from the invasion that they were generating excess power. So they were selling it to Europe. But as a result, for the first time this year, they started importing power from the European grid. And I forget which countries were responsible for providing them power. I want to say Romania was one. But various
Poland also, right?
Poland,
like so
I think,
close to Ukraine.
Probably Poland, yeah. So yeah, like they're buying power from other countries, but that has its own cost, and I'm sure they're weighing like how much having this extra power versus like when they don't have power, it hurts their economy, so they lose money that way. But when they do have power, they have to buy it, so that kind of costs money in their economy, right? So I assume they're kind of weighing the pros and cons of that approach and buying power strategically and doing their best, but it's definitely a difficult situation for the power grid in Ukraine. Russia's done tremendous damage to it. And, I think their plan moving forward is to try to adapt and build more like distributed infrastructure, like solar and stuff like that can be more distributed. But we do have, I know this week, actually, I do remember seeing a story that they got successfully a loan from, I think, the IMF or the EU or someone to rebuild a power plant that was destroyed by Russia. So it was like a 300 million euro loan that they got.
Great.
So, they are rebuilding power plants that they consider like valuable to rebuild, and they're getting some international support to do so. But generally speaking, it's like, I don't want to undersell Ukrainian resilience here, but it's a tough situation. The power grid's under serious threat, and more air defense is always going to help Ukraine not have to make such difficult choices, and that means more missiles. They need more missiles to actually shoot volumes of missiles out that can deal with the threats adequately, and they need more systems. Like they need more radars, they need more launchers. More of that stuff is always helpful. So I think we'll maybe wrap it up there. Germany, did you see anything in the chat you wanted to address before we go?
Just one question. What do you, Tochnyi, think about the A-29 Super Tucano fighter? Would it be useful for Ukraine? I don't think that me or Joseph or Alex can answer that question, to be honest. That's more of a question to John or something. I would say if you really, really need an immediate answer or a fast answer, I will ask John, and if you have a Twitter account, we can DM you later with the answer of him. Otherwise, I would ask you to set up the question again next week during the next stream when John is probably there.
Well, I think I'm happy to give a very preliminary answer just because I have
go ahead.
I've had discussions with John about this in Wife's past. Me and John have hung out and talked for on air for a long time. So this is a big thing that earlier on, basically I would say like around the time Ukraine got the first Patriot systems, that was like the next logical step was F-16s. And because the F-16s weren't forthcoming, people were, touting all kinds of alternatives. Gripen and Mirage, I would say, were the two more dominant ones, but a lot of people were talking about Super Tucano. And so Tucanos are, I think they're like a Brazilian, I'm not an expert in this, but they're like basically a Brazilian aircraft. I want to say they're propeller driven, but that could be mistaken. But they're definitely like they're a more primitive aircraft. I don't quite know how else to say it. They're like a slower aircraft. And there's like two different camps from aviation experts on the Super Tucano and like what it means for Ukraine. Camp number one says this thing is a slow-moving aircraft that will be lit up by Russian air defense like the minute it flies into Ukrainian airspace, right? That's like the first view on it. The second alternative view is this thing is, turboprop. Thank you, Mark, in chat. So it's like a propeller. It's an assisted propeller-driven plane, right? And it's like built on, it's like, I would describe it as maybe a second generation or like early third generation, I think, fighter aircraft, maybe not even that level, like in terms of like its primitiveness. So one camp of aviation nerds says that is crazy. It's going to get lit up and destroyed immediately in Ukraine. The other camp says, it's a different kind of war. They're dealing with all these drones in the air, and they're dealing with these other types of attacks from like glided bombs and cruise missiles and things. Like maybe if you get these things up in the air for like air defense reasons, maybe they could have some efficacy, right? So as far as I understand, it's pretty much a moot point because the Tucanos themselves are owned by Brazil, and they're not interested in selling them anyway. Ukraine has had like mixed like views on it. Occasionally they've made like very muted requests for something like the Tucano, but they've also said, no, we don't want anything like the Tucano. So I would say like the Ukrainian official position has been very mixed. And there is a US aircraft, I forget the name of it, but it has similar specifications to the Tucano. So like you probably could, there are other aircraft in the world that are kind of in this realm of Tucano. So even though the Tucano itself is probably off the table, this general discussion of like a turboprop aircraft being used for defensive purposes, primarily against like Shahed drones in Ukraine, is like it's a reasonable discussion to have. It's not a totally crazy discussion. I think, as far as I know, John's position on the matter is that's all dumb. Get F-16s. That would be John's position on the whole thing, as from my recollection of it. But that's like maybe a very preliminary overview. As Germany to Ukraine said, we're not the people to really answer the question. But next time we have some aviationists on, maybe we'll dust off that old chestnut and have them talk a little bit about the Super Tucano. Yeah.
Yeah, and an interesting question, we don't have to discuss it right here, just want to mention it very quickly. When you talked about the Ukrainian government actually didn't want this aircraft, right? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I've heard like on rare occasions they've said they've thought about getting it, but then, most of the time I've heard them say they're not interested.
Okay, because that actually reminds me of the Tornado, right? The old German aircraft. And about a year ago, it was also in June, when I remember correctly, the Ukrainian ambassador to Germany told in an interview, or said in an interview, that they are not interested in the German Tornadoes. And because they're focusing on F-16. And now I'm thinking, like, over a year ago, or about a year ago, with all the issues and the slow training and stuff like this they're facing right now, if this mindset is actually changing because they see that that F-16s are not that fast, or they don't get the F-16s as fast as they wished for. And with the Tornado, then also, I mean, I don't think we would supply it. First, because of the F-35 we are getting, it's far away. Second, there would be another huge discussion coming, because right now the Taurus cruise missile is not integrated into the Su-24 or some other Ukrainian aircraft, but in Tornado it would be integrated. So there's in the discussion, when we are supplying or would supply these aircrafts, would we also supply Taurus as an armament? That's just one thing that crossed my mind.
Yeah, that's actually one thing during the F-16 discussion, or the Mirage discussion. One thing we were mentioning, because you were like, why do this? It might speak to, again, this is just us speculating, but it might speak to the fact that these Soviet airframes are just at the end of their lives, or that they're running out of ammunition for them, right? In other words, just as you mentioned, adapting like US Western munitions to Soviet systems would be very difficult, but it would be relatively easy to supply, Western airframes with munition. Like, we have tons of those sitting around as Western armies, compared to like ground artillery systems and other things, at least in the US. But the one other thing I wanted to mention about turboprop aircraft, if I recall, this week, Germany to Ukraine, didn't a Ukrainian prop aircraft shoot down like a missile or something, or a drone? Do you know what I'm talking about? I think there was an incident this week.
This week, the only one I saw was a video when a Russian drone filmed Ukrainian aircraft trying to. Sorry?
Yeah, it was from a Russian drone filming a propeller plane of Ukraine. I don't remember the name, but apparently used against drones.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so they're using propeller aircraft against drones. Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll try to find the clip. If we, Yak 52. Yeah. Thanks, Marino. So I think that it is kind of a relevant like topic, because I think we're kind of in the same ballpark of like a Super Tucano, if I'm not mistaken. Like, that's what they would use them for in theory, and we're seeing Ukraine use like something roughly similar to do the job. So that's like, I just wanted to bring that up as like an argument, I would say, in favor of the efficacy of planes like the Super Tucano, right?
Yeah, that's the video we are talking about, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, crazy stuff to see that from a drone, to be honest. Yeah, if we don't have any other questions in chat or anything else we want to discuss about, Joseph, we actually came a lot of far, right? I mean, it's nearly 2 hours now, just 15 minutes away.
Yeah, it always happens.
Who would have thought that?
we always do it. Just, I guess, one final thing. Someone asked, like, why is the U.S. so hesitant to supply F-16 frames in training? This is just straight out of John Ridge's mouth. U.S. Air Force is obsessed with the conflict with China, right? They see them as needing every possible airframe and every possible pilot, and they're just not interested in giving up any of that stuff, considering what they see as the looming threat of China. So, yeah, that's pretty much the U.S. Air Force's position on the matter, and as a result, that's pretty much been the U.S.'s position on the matter. So it's unfortunate. I would personally like to see just a few airframes. What would 10 airframes, would that really make a huge difference? But yeah, that's the general. So yeah, I think we'll probably call it there, Maurice, at the risk of, as you said, continuing on and on.
Yeah, an endless discussion. To be honest, it was quite nice, right? Like the segments ended at about an hour or something like this, and now we talked about 45 minutes, maybe even more. So went longer than expected. Was a good one.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. Definitely appreciate everyone for checking us out live. Of course, please do like and subscribe. That will get you access to anything we ever do outside of our weekly stream, which we do every week at this time. So yeah, please let people know about Tochnyi. We really appreciate everyone's support and tuning in. So thanks very much to our panel who participated this week, and we'll see everyone next time. Slava Ukraini.
Slava.